Just a quick video to show the difference between letting the plant grow straight up and trimming it and letting it bush out instead. So both of these plants were once like this. Okay, this one is a cutting which I planted, and it's just growing straight up in one long stem. This one was growing exactly the same as that one. However, this one, I trimmed it. Okay, let me show you a close-up of how I trimmed it. So I trimmed it, you see this long stem? I trimmed it here. Okay, so once I trimmed it here, you can see the new growth. Okay, so instead of one long stem, it's got a branch going that way and that way. And also all the way along the stem, you see it branching out. See, and that leads to a bushier plant. And if you don't trim it, then it just goes longer and longer and longer on a single stem. So that is the difference between whether you trim your coleus or you don't. And this will apply to many other plants as well. If you want a bushier plant, then the more you trim it, the bushier it becomes. And if you want a long plant, then don't trim it because it will branch out. So yeah, it depends on what look you're going for. I personally like both of the looks. I've also noticed color difference depending on the amount of light that each plant gets. So if it gets more light, then the colors are darker, and if it gets less light, then the colors are lighter. And I've also noticed that depending on the amount of light it gets and the kind of pot it's in and the soil, the shape of the leaves change as well. So can you see, like these ones, these leaves are nice and pointy like this. But if you see this growth here, it's rounder. So they mutate as well. Color changes, the shape of the leaves can change as well. So that's another thing to consider. Also, when the coleus starts flowering, it would start flowering from here. When it starts flowering, the flowers take up a lot of energy from the plant. So, unless you want seeds and that you're going to be pollinating them either by hand or placing them outside to be pollinated by the butterflies and bees and things, then yeah, if you don't want seeds, then you don't really need to allow them to flower, because they take up a lot of energy from the leaves, which is the main attraction of this plant. So if you want the flowers, you can have them for a little while, but if you chop them off, then you get a better plant. Okay, so here's an example of a flower. You see that? That's a flower growing, starting. So if you want to focus the plant to focus more energy on the leaves, which are absolutely gorgeous, look at those. And then you're going to need to get rid of the flower, because the flower takes a lot of energy from the plant. So this is how I'm going to do it. Alright, so here's the flower, you can see. I'm just going to go in and nip it there. There. Okay. And then just check if there are any more. No, there aren't. And yeah, so that's how you nip flower buds from your coleus. Also, if you have less space and you have a lot of plants, then maybe this one would be easier to grow, because you can fit a lot of pots in a smaller space and have them, make use of the vertical space that you have in your area, and just have them all growing straight up. so that way you get more pots fitting on the windowsill. Whereas if you have more space, then you can allow your plants to bush out and have less pots in that same space because you've got more space. So that's another idea as well. So if you don't have a lot of space, then just let them grow long so that you're using up the vertical space instead. Yeah, so that's something else to consider. Also, regarding propagation, so you can either let the flowers go to seed once they flower and then collect the seeds and plant them, or you can make clones out of your plants. So if you grow from seed, then I think there's no guarantee how the plant will turn out. Whereas if you want the exact same plant, then you need to clone the plant by taking trimmings. So if you have a plant like this and you trim it, that would be called a tip cutting, because you're trimming the tip. Or you can make cuttings from the side branches. So for example, this one here, I can just take that cutting. But that would be quite long, so I could take a shorter cutting. I could maybe cut here. So I would cut just below 2 leaves. So see this leaf here? I would cut there, here. And then I'll have this bit here. So I've got some examples here for you. So say this was attached to there like that. Okay, so I would take that off, remove some bottom leaves and pop it into some water. The water I'll change every week or every few days if I want to, but I normally just change it every week. And within about 2 weeks, you'll get roots. Now, some of the varieties I've noticed take quite long to root. It could take 3 or 4 weeks. And some varieties start rooting within a week. Now you can either root your cuttings in a pot that is not transparent to prevent the green algae growth in the water, or you can put it in a transparent pot so that you can see the roots developing. And this is a cutting I took recently from another variety. And you see these nodes? There's nodes here and at the bottom here as well. Here and here. But I've also noticed that you don't even really need nodes, because the roots come out from the middle as well, even when there's no nodes. See, this is not a node, this is a stem, but there's roots coming out even from the stem, all along the stem, not just the nodes. So when I take cuttings, I do try to include a couple of nodes at least. But if there are no nodes, then I have also been successful with that as well. So you can either root them in water, or you can take the trimming and then plant it straight into the soil and keep the soil moist, and that would root well as well. But I think it would work better with smaller cuttings like this if you put it in soil. And make sure you keep the soil moist for at least 1 or 2 weeks until it's fully rooted, and then you can allow the soil to dry up if you want to. So if I didn't want to see all this soil, I could take lots of little cuttings like this from all these branches, and then I can just plant them all the way around, and I'll get a bushier plant and I won't be able to see the pot or the soil or anything. So you can do that as well.